Even the shaitan beautifies it. The concept of haram, sometimes you have couples, for example, who have committed haram before they're married. Then they marry, they come to us and be like, I don't know why. Before we were married, it was so hot. And now that we're in halal, it's like boring. Not to mention that sometimes the women will ask, so let's go now into the issue of fantasies, for women to enact some of these fantasies. So one person, for example, and some couples make this mistake, they watch porn together to spice up things, to get things, moving. They justify it. 100% haram. And the guy usually initiates it. And then the woman likes it. And she'll start asking him to do certain things like that, or to bring certain things that they saw into their love life to spice things up. And then the guy's like, in a point of no return, like, I don't know what to do now. She's like crazy about this stuff. And it's my fault because I introduced it to her. She never even knew about these things. All right? Or, for example, the woman who have some weird fantasies with like having more men in one sitting, or sometimes having even a woman with them, right? So women do have what's called, in current terms, it's called like gay curiosity or lesbian curiosity. It's quite popular amongst women, where women wonder how it feels to be with another woman and have a threesome and all that. It's, one of the things, is one of the fantasies of men. And also, believe it or not, people think it's like, it's a fantasy of a man to have two women at the same time, like to have, lesbian interaction, all that. And it happens sometimes in men. There's huge regrets on both sides. Usually these kind of relationships don't last. But sometimes people don't understand that it's even a fantasy amongst women. A lot of women fantasize to have intimacy with another woman, or with their husband and another woman. Why? Because it's so popularized in the culture, in the movies, in social media. And you have to all agree to an extent that culturally speaking, and I'm talking about the global culture, that two women being together is much more appealing or okay, let's say, than two men. Even for women, like, it is what it is. It's, I don't know, you can comment and let me know what you think, but this is what I found, even amongst research. So when a woman requests a man to like, her husband, like, bring someone else, or I want to have a fantasy about more men. Man, like, what man would allow for his woman to fantasize about another man? That's, you qualified as the youth right away. I mean, it's a huge thing. Or she asks him for like anal sex, right? Imagine a woman saying, I want you to do this to me, or I want you to do that to me. And the guy's like confused, like, whoa. Even though he himself might have thought about that, or has these fantasies, again, the double standard kicks in, but then the Fitra kicks in, he cannot accept that his wife is going to think that way. He excuses himself, well, I'm a man. Of course I can think like that. But when the woman thinks like that, he's like, man, this is horrible, I want to divorce her, blah, blah, blah. Of course, both are haram. Both are not correct. Both are haram. Both are not correct. But this is the reality. So, sexual fantasies are driven by what you see around. They don't just pop into your mind. Don't just come up like, I want to get some leather and some whips, and I want to tie you to the bed, and I want to do this and that. That doesn't just come from nowhere. They've seen it somewhere, and it shocked them. That shock effect actually is what drives the hormones and the desire to explode. Sometimes that shocking effect is what causes more desire to come about. Even the shaitan beautifies it. The concept of haram, sometimes you have couples, for example, who have committed haram before they're married. Then they marry, they come to us and be like, I don't know why. Before we were married, it was so hot. And now that we're in halal, it's like boring. Maybe because shaitan's working hard. And he makes the haram very appealing. And remember the hadith of Jibreel, when he was sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to look at Jannah and Jahannam. And he said, I looked at Jahannam and it's surrounded by desires. Everyone will enter in it. And I looked at Jahannam, surrounded by desires, everyone will enter. And I looked at Jannah, surrounded by difficulties, no one will enter. This is the evidence here. Jahannam is appealing. Evil is appealing. You have to understand. So these fantasies come from people disobeying Allah, not lowering the gaze, getting involved into weird stuff. It happens. How do we deal with it? We're going to talk about it. But sexual fantasies are both on both sides, men and women. They don't just spark from the mind itself. Yes, the shaitan does waswasa and amplifies it, but there's a seed somewhere, a book, a movie, a this or that, even just a small series, sometimes not a full-fledged porn, but things can start pushing and adding more and more and more and more and more. So, it's a problem. It's a problem. People fantasize while having intimacy even. Some talk about it, some don't talk about it. Should you divorce because someone is like, imagine some people cannot actually climax without fantasizing. Now khalas, you're supposed to divorce the people and that's it? No, you have to manage it and work with it and see what's allowed, what's not allowed, to what extent, what's the lesser of two evils, and so on. It's not so easy to talk about. I've asked a few scholars about this, and some have abstained from talking about it because they said looking at the evidence, and some have said no, it's totally impermissible. So it's a bit of a complicated issue. I'm not going to give here a'udhu billah, a ruling or pass ruling. To be honest, from the scholars I asked, there was no clear ruling other than the ones who said it's haram. What I was a bit surprised is that some people were very careful to say what's haram, what's not haram, what's an action, and so on. Of course, things can lead to a lot of problems. So from there you can say, well, yeah, that can definitely qualify as haram. But I'm talking about, let's say there's a couple who finds themselves in this predicament. Khalas, they should divorce. And both of them probably have fantasies, and one is now trying to pull the other one and pressure the other one, usually the man on the woman. How dare you have these fantasies when they themselves might have it. Now, if it's a person who's super clean and mashallah coming from a certain background, and they're like shocked now that how come this is happening? Maybe, and it's really unsolvable, and the woman is really pushing. Like in one of the cases I said, like they were very young, eating your vegetables before you get sick. Well, what we're talking about a lot of times is the medicine that has side effects, that is administered after the event, such as in our case. Fearing Allah, lowering your gaze, being in an uncorrupt society, and it goes from the micro to the macro. What happens around, everyone's responsible. Kullukum ra'i, everyone is a shepherd. So everyone has a part of responsibility in this issue, yes, in this issue. What? About desire and about people's desires and fantasy? Yes. Because for example, if a society is clean and those who control the society clean it up and protect it, and a lot of these things that can generate fantasies and desires will not happen. I'll give you an example. Sex shops all over the Western countries. Muslims go to it, yes, trust me, I've had clients who have said, I can't stop, I go to these sex shops. What do you think will happen in these sex shops? A lot of ideas, it generates a lot of fantasies, a lot of things. It is what it is, right? But you see, if, let's say it would be an Islamic environment where these things don't exist, really, then you would find that, okay, there's no option for you to start creating these ideas. So that is on, let's say, a more macro scale. On a micro scale, your own accountability and what you look at and what you do and what you harbor in terms of thoughts and desires. Do you see how it changes? Everyone plays a role. Going back again to the Quran and Sunnah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us upon the Fitra. Okay? Every person is born in the Fitra pure. Pure. Simple. And in this purity, a man and a woman know how to be intimate. They can get satisfied easily. Their mind is clear. Their hearts are clear. They can easily climax and be satisfied from just normal intimacy, from normal intercourse. Normal. But when the corruption takes place, then the tolerance levels become higher and higher, need more shock to be pleased, and that's where the perversions and things come in. That does that mean, khalas, and these people are written off, they're going to Jahannam right away, we should divorce them, leave them? No, you have to work and try to manage it and help them, and it depends. But this is the reality. This is the reality. So, a very sensitive topic. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about this. Don't divorce your wives just because they have fantasies. Don't divorce your wives just because you caught them masturbating. Don't divorce your wives if they watch porn. You don't have to divorce them. You need to work with them. You need to help them. You need to, guide them. Don't just quit right away and just leave them just because that. You need to help them against shaitan. Don't help shaitan against them. It's not so simple. I just gotta leave her. Wait a second, maybe you have the same fantasies, bro. And if someone catch you, what would you do? Right? Gotta be fair, man. It does not mean we justify these things. You have to understand again. I'm gonna repeat it again. Preemptive is always better than damage. But we need to manage damage control. The Quran has a lot of prescriptions on what kind of medicine to take to try to fix yourself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts tawbah. And how many chances does He give? Why do we give no chances? At the same time, we understand that some people just can't handle it. They can't do it. They're so shocked that they're betrayed, that this thing has happened. They're so shocked. It's shocking, disturbing. Yes, it happens. So, there's a lot's been said in this lecture. But what I want you to focus on, as I always say, what are the solutions? The solutions always come, as I said in my lectures, is always to remind people to stick to Quran and Sunnah. Preemptive measures, lower gaze, try to do your best. But if you're stuck and you're already have been infected, and there are other solutions as well, as we said, it's quite pragmatic, quite real. Not everyone can do it. It's understandable, but that's why I always say, don't give up right away. Don't just throw everything out. Don't just break your family, because you need to understand where you're living in, what time you're living in, the time of fitna. And not everyone who has fallen into fitna or has committed sins or mistakes are just to be written off and thrown away. To make even a bigger fitna of now two people living separate with desires who might commit zina, their families being broken apart, their children being destroyed, and so on and so forth. This is the Sharia. It's not just this or that. It's not just black and white. There's a lot of nuances, and the spectrum is wide on how to find a solution and how to deal with a solution. Go to a counselor. There's amana there. Talk to someone who can give you experiences. Wallahi, just explaining to the brother the issues and explaining what I'm explaining to you, it stopped him from divorcing his wife. A family could have been broken just by him not understanding, because he couldn't comprehend how can a woman do this. Like most people, they think that women don't actually ever engage in this kind of behavior. They don't have any sexual thoughts, no fantasies, no high sex drive, no desire. And this is a misconception that is propagated by females first and foremost a lot, because of the pretend that they're more innocent than everyone else. We pray and we hope that women are innocent. That's what we want, afafa, for everyone. But in the 21st century, you have to understand there's this huge contradiction. We've talked about contradiction in men a lot in this lecture, but there's a huge contradiction in women, that they always portray themselves as very, very innocent. But giving the society, and it's not necessarily just their fault, giving the fitna that's around it, a lot of times they're not innocent. Again, does that mean we just let them go to Jahannam? No. We need to work together as a family, as a couple, as a community, as an ummah. The problem is we don't. And again, people be upset because no one talks about these things. And when I do, I get those hate messages, how dare you, this and that. Okay. All right. So I've said what I've said. I've given some solutions. I'm not saying that I've solved the problem now. It's a very complicated problem, but I've given some solutions and some direction of how these things can be managed. Not necessarily solved, but managed. So I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you understand. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you and protect your wives, protect the husbands, protect everyone. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.